her the day she died. I was there. I cried at her grave. I saw them when they buried her.
Yes, you were. But what you and I are seeing now is not just a terrible dream. Our mother is a vampire.
Vampire?
In the daytime, she sleeps. In the nighttime, she wakes. To feed on human blood that she must have in order to sustain her life.
Is it the terrifying dungeon of doom? The dead return to life, living and lusting for bizarre pleasures. Fantastic fiends on a bloody rampage.
Nellie Louise Vaughn passed away at the age of 19, March 31st, 1889. She died of pneumonia. Now, of course, there's the Rhode Island vampire legend combined with the ghost legend. Some say Nellie resents her undeserved reputation as a vampire, so she's come back as a ghost to vindicate herself. Some say she's a vampire that is entombed in a crypt, aka Barnabas Collins, and she's waiting to be released. But some say she's a witch who appears on Halloween night, floating over her grave. Whatever the explanation, there was no connotation with any preternatural form involving Nellie Vaughn until nearly 80 years after her death. There's the story of a Coventry high school teacher who told his class that a vampire is buried off Route 102. Didn't specify the name, so a group of his students on Halloween night went searching for the 19-year-old vampire lady. They came to the West Greenwich Cemetery, found the grave of Nellie Vaughn, seemed to meet the age. However, it also had the inscription, "I am waiting and watching for you." Now, this connotation is not uncommon on gravestones from that era. Simply means someone who has passed away prematurely and is waiting and watching for family members and loved ones in heaven. But they took it to mean a vampire connotation. That's what the teacher had told them. They believed they'd found their girl. Hence, the reputation, Nellie Vaughn as a vampire. Nellie Vaughn as a witch. Nellie Vaughn is a ghost, vindicating her undeserved reputation. However, there are people who claim to have had sightings of the apparition of Nellie Vaughn in that cemetery. People claim, even recently, to have seen her floating around the cemetery grounds, following cars down Plain Meeting House Road, hovering off the ground, wearing a long Victorian dress. Even Charles Turek Robinson in New England Ghost Files has related a story where she appeared in modern dress, talking to a visitor of the cemetery. She explained that she was an historic enthusiast who was researching Nellie Vaughn. However, she became agitated and began saying, "Nellie Vaughn was never a vampire. Nellie Vaughn was never a vampire." And eventually the woman started exiting the cemetery. When she turned around, the woman she'd been talking to suddenly had vanished, no trace, and she couldn't have gotten out of the cemetery that fast. That's just one of the legends. Many still abound. People claim to see her to this day. And of course, there's a lot of vandalism resulting in that cemetery as a result of this. Whatever, there remains the mystery of Nellie Louise Vaughn. Connotated as a vampire, undeserved reputation. Up until the past 30 years, there was a gentleman who remembered Nellie Vaughn when he was a member of the church he attended. He himself said there was nothing to indicate there was anything unusual about Nellie Vaughn. Simply a lovely young woman who was a member of the local church in West Greenwich. Here we have the legend of Nellie Louise Vaughn. In July of 2011, we visited the West Greenwich Cemetery, West Greenwich, Rhode Island, located along Plain Meeting House Road, to visit the burial place of Nellie Louise Vaughn, alleged vampire and ghost. We are here at the West Greenwich Cemetery, Historical Cemetery number 2. Many legends are associated with this cemetery, including the legend of Nellie Vaughn, the witch, aka vampire, aka ghost, who is out to defend her soiled reputation. Also, the phantom dogs of Hell's Gate are known to walk around the perimeter of the cemetery, although they never actually enter it. So we're going to explore some of those legends today and see what we come up with. Now, some people have mistakenly assumed that Nellie Vaughn is actually buried here. She is not, but therein is the vampire connotation. People believe that she was entombed in here to keep her from getting out. And as you can see, people have been systematically chipping away at this, doing vandalism to try to get at the vampire enclosed within and let her out, or at least see her mortal or immortal remains. And it's unfortunate that there's been so much vandalism here because she isn't even buried here. Morning, Keith Johnson.
Keith, nice meeting you. My name is Bob Butler, and I'm a member of the Rhode Island Historic Cemeteries Commission, as well as with my wife here in town, the unofficial protectors of the cemeteries.
Oh, that's excellent. It's very nice to meet you.
Well, thank you.
What can you tell me about the history of this cemetery?
Well, this cemetery goes back to about 1894. Don't quote me on the date, but it's somewhere around there, and it was established by the Tillinghasts. Actually, I don't have the name quite right, but regardless, there are a lot of Tillinghasts that are buried in here. Pardon Tillinghast was the pastor of the Plain Meeting House, which was the American Baptist Church at the time. Actually, the church still uses it for 2 sessions a year. So it's still a Baptist church here in the town. And there are 90 different lots in here that have pretty much all been sold off at this point. And what happens is the cemetery passes from heir to heir to heir, and is still controlled by a Tillinghast. So the Tillinghast have a great interest in the cemetery, and my wife and I and several other volunteers have been trying to take care of it.
Right.
It is strictly a volunteer effort. The town does support it because there are some lots under perpetual care, but it's very few. And since there are 90 individual different lots, the ones that are under perpetual care would never support the clearing that you see done here. We recently spent about 27 hours collectively getting it to the condition it's in. The Tillinghast are actually coming here for a meeting at the end of this week. So we wanted it to look nice for them. But beyond that, now that we've got it at a reasonable level of protection in terms of the ground being kept down and the stones are all visible, we want to try to keep it this way. So I will tell you that the town is supportive of the effort. They have very little money to put forth to this, and we understand that, so we don't look to get paid for it. But if we need a blade to be sharpened or something of that nature, then yeah, they're willing to do that.
Oh, great. That's fantastic. Well, what can you tell me about the Nellie Vaughn legend itself and all the attention that has been foisted upon this cemetery because of her?
Well, all I can tell you, first of all, I suffered a tick-borne illness half a dozen years ago, and my memory is really very poor. So if I had my wife here, she could tell you the exact story, but I'm not going to attempt it. But what I will tell you is that with all the work we've done over the last 10 years, it's amazing the number of people that come not only here, but other cemeteries around the town looking for her, looking to, I don't know, put forth their idea of what happened and so forth. I myself don't really know the story, and when anybody comes to me looking for the story, I usually just send them away.
Right.
Because we're all about protection of graveyards and trying to honor and respect them, whereas a lot of people are looking to have a different bent on it.
Yes.
And one good example is the tomb that's out in the middle here. Actually had space for two bodies to be entombed there. When you look at the amount of work that somebody did to erect that thing, it would have been a whole lot easier just to put them in the ground and have a nice gravestone, but they didn't do that. Over the years, the kids have pried it open and taken the skull out and done other things that are just terrible.
Right.
So right now, this has been sealed up. The grounds themselves have been cut back. Next phase will be to try to re-erect some of these stones that have been toppled and repair some of the others that were broken. So I can't tell you anything about the actual Nellie Vaughn Mercy Ground
Right.
thing, because
Connection
I don't,
there, the
I
supposed
don't really
connection.
remember the exact story, and since I'm absolutely in the other direction, we have actually mentored one of the students who was going in that direction, and I told her at the time, I said, I don't know if this is going to work. We're all about protection of graveyards and respect for the cemetery. You're into the legends and so forth. So we'll tell you our part of it. If you want to explore the legend, that's your business. As far as I know, she did get her senior project done, but we try to put her on a different track and get her into a mode of trying to think about this as protection of somebody's ancestors and trying to make sure that we preserve the history that's written here, because all of these graveyards here, particularly in this town, are the recorded history of the town. And that's important to us. I'm former Conservation Commission member, former Planning Board member, and town council member.
Oh,
So
I see.
my wife and I have been here in town for 22 years, and we care very deeply about this town and trying to protect things. So, also having been a member of the Land Trust, who does control this property now, they were given the property and they fixed it up. They've taken care of the church. The church has never looked this good in 50 years.
It looks beautiful.
Done a great job under the auspices of Steve Wright, who's the chair. And we support his effort, and we try to work with them very closely. They take care of everything on this side of the wall. We're taking care of stuff on the other side.
Great.
So,
Yeah. I understand there was actually a grave violated in 1993 around Halloween, where somebody actually dug up a grave and took out one of the bodies and put a can of beer in one hand, a pack of cigarettes in the other, and I mean that's the epitome of desecration and disrespect right
that
there.
probably would be the tomb, because that would be the only thing you could readily get at. Whether it actually happened that way or not, we lived here in town. I don't recall the story. That's pretty gruesome. I'm
Yes,
sure the
it
police
is.
department would have some information on that if you wanted to go
Right.
and check with them. They'd be more than glad to share that. To tell you the truth, I don't think I've heard that story, or at least not that way.
Right.
And again, since I'm oriented total 180 degrees in the opposite direction. If I heard it, I wouldn't file it away for reference or anything like that. That's a pretty terrible thing. There are people like that out there. I mean, if you just look at the desecration done in this yard, it's very sad.
Yes.
But under Steve Wright's direction, they did apply for a grant from Champlain, and they did put all of these granite piers and the chain. The town actually replaced all the rough mud, which is what was here, clay-like materials in the yard. So the kids would come in and they'd do donuts and they'd dig it all up, and they just made a heck of a mess around the church. This has all been replaced by the town with rotten rock, with support from the Champlain Foundation. Steve managed to get all of these bollards in place with the chains up, and now that we have these gates that are kept closed except when someone has a need to come in, the desecration level has dropped off, and we're very glad to see it. I'm up here today trying to take care of some of the remote lighting facilities so that we can kind of shine a light on things. And hopefully the kids will go away. I'm sure they'll do something else.
It's quite an improvement what you've been doing here, and it's really, really appreciated by people. I want you to know that.
Well, let's hope so.
Okay.
With that, the respect may increase. So. Keith, nice talking with you.
Nice talking
with
you,
you. Good luck on
Bob.
your project. We hope you guys can get this word spread far and wide so that there are people out there interested in preservation rather than desecration or the stories that are out there about the different people that are buried or may not be into folklore or whatever. So
Any place that anybody can go to, like a website or anything like it, to donate? We could put that up.
Mostly just to the town, because the town does have some 22 different cemeteries that have perpetual care funds that have been added. If they want to donate, that would be the place. Now, if they want to donate specifically to this, then I would suggest that they go to the town clerk's office and they can be given the information there. This cemetery is West Greenwich 002. It is the Tillinghast lot, and the town would be most grateful if people wanted to donate to support the preservation efforts. Thank you for asking.
Nellie Louise Vaughn died at the age of 19 from pneumonia. She was the daughter of George B. and Ellen Vaughn. Now, there was no vampire connotation associated with her name until after 80 years since she had died. Supposedly, she was mistaken for Mercy Brown. The story is some high school students came to this cemetery looking for the vampire girl who died at the age of 19 in the 1800s. They came across Nellie Vaughn's gravestone. They were actually looking for Mercy Brown, but they came to this cemetery and they found a stone that said age 19, and at the bottom was an inscription, "I am waiting and watching for you." Now, that was quite common at the time for a young person who had died before their time, and it simply made, "I am waiting and watching for you from heaven." Now, they didn't take it that way. They took it as, wow, we found our girl. We found the vampire girl who's buried here. And it just spread like wildfire, the legend that she is a vampire. Now, there are other legends that Nellie sometimes appears here, sometimes as a vampire or sometimes as a ghost, to eradicate her reputation, her undeserved reputation for being a vampire. So she becomes a ghost. Hence, she tells people Nellie was never a vampire. Now, there is a story, this is in the New England Ghost Files by Charles T. Robinson, that a woman was here. She had been here often doing gravestone rubbings. Her husband had been scared out of here because he had heard a female voice tell him, "I am perfectly pleasant." Received some scratches on his face. He never came back here. But the woman herself came back. One time she was here doing some historical research, trying to do gravestone rubbings, which didn't work out because the paper would become wet. She tried to take pictures. The pictures of Nellie's gravestone would turn out in reverse, even on the negatives, whereas all the other photographs turned out normal. She was here again, and a young woman with long dark hair who claimed to be a member of an historical research society was also here and began a conversation with her. conversation was very pleasant until this young woman began obsessively repeating, Nellie was never a vampire. Nellie's not a vampire. Nellie's not a vampire. Well, this woman got a little nervous and turned to leave. When she turned back to look, this young woman who was dressed in modern clothing had vanished. So, some people think that was Nellie Vaughn, again, defending her reputation. And there's been sightings of a young woman in long Victorian clothes who has been seen wandering through this cemetery, or at one point she was sitting upon Nellie Vaughn's grave, stroking her long dark hair in an agitated manner, actually seemed to be floating several inches above her grave. So all this is legend, though. None of it can be really documented or proven. What we know is that there was no connotation with Nellie Vaughn about either being a ghost, a vampire, or a witch, or what have you, until over several decades after her death. Now, there's another story in this cemetery about the phantom dogs of Hell's Gate. Now, Hell's Gate is actually down the road on Plain Meeting House Road. Very, very difficult to find now. But there was an old recluse woman, according to legend, who lived there, and she was basically shunned by the town. Her only companions in her later life were two dogs, two mongrel dogs. Supposedly, these dogs appear around Hell's Gate. You can see them walking along the road. And they never actually come into this cemetery. They've been seen around the perimeter of the cemetery wall. And they won't come in. Whether they're warning people or guarding the area, we don't know. Back here during Halloween week 2006, I was here with author and paranormal researcher Rosemary Ellen Guiley. I was giving her a tour of this cemetery because she is an expert on folklore and vampire histories. Now, I was telling her about Nellie Vaughn. However, I had not told her about the phantom dogs of Hell's Gate who walk around the outside of this cemetery. Coincidentally, two dogs matching their description, two mongrel dogs, suddenly were outside of the cemetery gates here. Rosemary, who has a slight fear of dogs, suddenly stopped and froze solid, and it was then, only then, that I told her the story of the phantom dogs of Hell's Gate. Now, these dogs supposedly belonged to Mary Brown, a recluse who was accused of being a witch. Then again, you get the mistaken identity, confused with Mercy Brown, confused with Nellie Vaughn. And that's where the legend of Nellie becoming a witch kicks in. But the dogs simply walked away after barking a couple of times, and I went outside immediately, looked around the cemetery gates, and I didn't see them anywhere. Could they have gotten away that fast? It's possible, but just another mystery that probably has a natural explanation. But that's the story of the phantom dogs of Hell's Gate, another connotation with this cemetery, and Nellie Vaughn, and confusion with Mercy Brown.
I am not hugely impressed by the haunting aspect of the West Greenwich Cemetery where Nellie is interred. I have on occasion been there when there has been sort of a melancholy feeling in the area. I know that there have been a lot of experiences by other people, and I think possibly the reason for that is all of the ritualism that's been done there, all of the satanic rituals that have taken place have attracted some sort of negativity into the area, and it probably masquerades as Nellie Vaughn on occasion, but I do not think it is the spirit of Nellie Vaughn.
What about the phantom dogs that appear there sometimes?
Again, brought in by the satanic rituals that have been performed there, which I've certainly seen evidence of that when we visited the area.
Now, there was the acorn experience I had there once. I was with two friends. They were a teenage paranormal group, and I was mentoring them. We happened to be there. One of the young men was in a wheelchair, and all of a sudden, an acorn came flying out, hit all three of us. just like in billiards. It just did a triangle and it just hit us all like that, very forcefully, enough to make us jump. Now, is that theoretically possible? Yes. It's just very, very strange the way it just, as if somebody had shot at us, hit all three of us, and then went sailing away.
Odd occurrence. I
Yeah.
have no explanation for that.
Well, I put it down as a coincidence, but it was something that I always remembered, something notable.
It's notable. Keith?
Yeah. It was very notable.
At midnight, all sorts of evil spirits are set loose. People disappear without a trace.
Last night, after a tiresome journey, I finally reached my destination, the castle of Count Dracula.
The ship seems burdened with a curse. One sailor and our cook have disappeared without a trace.
Nosferatu, the vampire, coming from 20th Century Fox. Nosferatu, the vampire, a film unlike any Dracula film ever made. Nosferatu.